Today I'm going to be showing you my Wangle. This is the 12mm f2.8 fisheye lens from Samyang. It's an ultra Wangle, an ultra wide angle. Today I'll be using it on a Sony a7 III. Samyang have pushed out a load of variations of this lens. They've made a f2 version for APS-C cameras. They've also made a 14mm version that has autofocus. This is the FE version, that's 12mm f2.8, and it's a manual focus lens. It gives you that wonderful 180-degree field of view. Samyang have given it a load of letters after its name. This is the ED-AS-NCS fisheye lens. This means that it has extra low dispersion, a spherical and nano-coated glass, meaning it will give you a sharper image with higher contrast in brighter conditions. It'll do a better job at removing aberration, ghosting, but also it's very good marketing BS from Samyang. One of the most unusual things about this lens is the huge bulge at the front of it. It's very vulnerable, sticks out quite a lot. Samyang have put this irregular shaped hood on it, which they call a petal hood. It has cut out pieces on the side so it doesn't come into frame on that huge 180-degree field of view, but it still has a bit of protection at the bottom and top from bashing it against something or just from the sun to keep the flare down. Even with that though, it's still very vulnerable for the heavy-handed amongst us like me. If you want to take it out hiking or into the mountains and bash it off rocks, then it feels very vulnerable. What I tend to do is replace the cap each and every time. I don't trust myself. Whether or not you can get some extra protection on there, I'm not sure. There's not much room for anything on the sides that wouldn't come into shot. I don't think there's the option of putting a filter on there, a UV filter or something. I don't think it's possible. If anyone knows of an idea, let me know. Otherwise, replace the cap every time. Again, this is the Sony FE mount version of this lens. Samyang have made a whole bunch of variations. This is the 12mm FE version. I'll put a link in the description. It's full manual focus, there's no autofocus, and the focus ring goes from a true infinity all the way down to, and this is a neat feature I think, 0.2 of a meter. So it gives you the ability to focus on something that close to the lens while maintaining that huge 180-degree field of view. It's a really cool effect. The aperture is from f2.8 all the way down to f22. There's no electronics in the lens that talk back to the Sony camera, at least, so it doesn't tell you what f-stop you're at. You need to rely on this ring, which is no problem at all. It's a clickable ring. I like a nice clickable aperture ring. It's difficult to knock it out of place accidentally. And when used at f2.8 with that 0.2 focal distance, it creates a really nice effect. We'll try it on these flowers. A little bit further down the aperture ring, this lens is incredible. At f9 and beyond, it's pin sharp throughout the entire range. For a wide angle lens, a wangle, it's quite often a compromise in quality and sharpness, but this lens does it very, very well. We're at f9 there, and if I wang the focus ring down to infinity, my whole scene is pin sharp. Size wise, it's relatively short. Weight wise, it's relatively heavy, coming in at about half a kilo, owing to its aluminium construction and it being a good old chunk of glass. Cost wise, it's about 400 quid, which is a bit of a bargain for Sony full frame mount glass, in my opinion, owing I think to the fact that it has no autofocus, but the manual focus is very good. It's smooth, it's interesting to play around with, and that huge depth of field you get down at f9 and below should put the minds at rest of anyone a bit daunted by picking up a manual focus lens. Another reason for being cheap is probably that it has no image stabilisation, although when you stick it on a Sony camera like the A7 with in-body image stabilisation, you don't really need it. It's also very, very wide, so even handheld, I can give you an example with the Steadicam walk. A couple of other things worth mentioning are the lens for Astro and the APS-C Crop mode. For Astro, I found this lens to be really great fun. At f2.8, it's just fast enough to get some good night skies. I've got some great night skies up in the Rynagev of Snowdonia with some lovely Milky Way shots behind my tent. Really fantastic. The great thing about it is that I think because it's a manual focus lens and not autofocus, the focus infinity point is a true infinity point. I think that's how it works. So whenever you bang this straight to infinity, everything in infinity becomes sharp. See, stars become pin sharp, at least it does on my version. You'll know that if you're using a lens with autofocus and you do that, quite often it'll go past infinity for some strange reason. I'm sure there's a good technical explanation. But on this lens, at night, you can just whack it to infinity and the stars are in focus. What I've done in the past is apply a bit of tape around it. Obviously, as a video professional, a bit of black tape, and it'll keep the night sky in focus. Another good thing is the APS-C Crop. When you're using it on a full frame Sony camera, I assign the APS-C Crop button to C1, and then you can zoom in. You get a 180 degree field of view in normal mode. I'll give you an example from this exact position. 180 degree field of view. Stop that recording. Hit my APS-C Crop button and record at I think 125 degree field of view. So a nice little punch into the scene at the touch of a button. Another great thing is that this lens does a great job at removing barrel distortion at that 180 degree field of view. But it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be a compromise. So you'll see on this 180 degree field of view a bit of a bend in the trees on the side, maybe in the tops. To be honest, it does a really good job, but with APS-C mode, which is here, it'll remove a bit of that barrel distortion. This will be more pronounced with different tilts, different angles, different objects, straight lines, trees, buildings, people. It's really useful to have that APS-C Crop mode. And that's it. Link in the description. Out.